Good morning.
It's the last day of GaymerX.
Oh.
But we're all together.
That's all of the highs and lows.
I like to take you out and bring you back in. I'm Jessica Merizan. I lead the community team for Bioware.
I love you guys
so much. We love you too. Thank you for coming out for our panel, Freaking Out the Neighbors. This is our second year here at GaymerX, and this is one of our favorite conventions to attend. It's a very important convention to us, and we are so excited to be here. The organizers are awesome, and this is a really well-run con. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves.
Say the volunteers. Everyone say hi to the volunteers. And give them lots
Yeah, thank you.
All the volunteers are sitting in the back of whatever.
So I'll let everyone introduce themselves, and since this is David's brainchild, I'm going to let him talk a little bit about this panel, and then we'll jump right in.
You started to end this thing.
Sure. I'm Robyn Théberge, and I'm a development manager at Bioware, and I'm currently working with the combat team.
My name is Karin Weekes. I am lead editor for both of our IPs, currently working on Dragon Age Inquisition.
My name is Patrick Weekes. I'm a writer and currently working on Inquisition as Dave's lackey.
And I'm David Gaider. I'm currently the lead writer on the Dragon Age series. I've been with Bioware for about 15 years now. Okay, so Freaking Out the Neighbors. I'm the one who proposed this panel to the GaymerX group, and my fellow panel attendees at various times throughout the past couple of days have come to me and says, "What is this panel about?" I didn't explain. Freaking Out the Neighbors. Bioware has been putting LGBT content into our games for a number of years now, basically ever since the days of Jade Empire. So it's not new for us, and if you've been following our games at all, it's not new for you. At various times, though, it feels like there are people out there that it is incredibly new to them. And that's what I mean by freaking out the neighbors. We've been putting stuff into our games that elicits concern from portions of our audience. And the reason I wanted to put this panel together is that it's not entirely fair to dismiss all concerns that are raised. There are people that just basically do not understand why this is important, why this is something that Bioware would choose to focus on, and what it means. And I think since we have our person who leads our community team and who has to deal with the kind of feedback we get from our freaked out neighbors on a regular basis, Jessica, perhaps you could start with explaining what the difference is between negative feedback that is worthwhile to consider and respond to versus the stuff that clearly isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the first thing, and you guys encounter this on a day-to-day basis, is constructive feedback versus just kind of negative feedback or just stuff that we're going to tune out is what is at its very base is respect. What is respectful when you bring to the table? We always want to treat you with a level of respect and courtesy. If we're not treating you that way, please come talk to me, because Aaron Flynn will have something to say about that to all of us. He's our GM, and he is the nicest person ever, and he knows a little too much about all of us personally. But we need to have a two-way dialogue that is based on a foundation of respect and civility. And coming to that is having constructive feedback, saying not just, I hate that, but I hate that, or I don't like that, or I feel very passionately against that or for that, because of XYZ. I think that having a dialogue or a debate, we are totally fine with impassioned debate. That's 100% something that makes our games better. I think that you can see a progression of our games. I really liked Patrick's dedication in The Masked Empire about LGBTQ dedication, that listening to the fan feedback, listening to panels, Tumblr posts, YouTube videos, we really do take that constructive feedback, what you're saying, not just positive, like, yay, good job, but I don't like that because XYZ, but going and saying, oh, I hate you, or going in and just, you know, taking a picture of David Gaider with, you know, devil horns. That's super funny. That's super funny, but you know, Dave's probably not going to read the rest of your art, or maybe he will. And
my block finger is so
yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's the difference, and I think that, you know, we're probably preaching to the choir here because you guys are all sitting, and I said it on another panel, and because we're all rated 18 plus here. You don't pee where you sit. You know, dogs know that. Dogs don't pee in their kennels. They just don't. They learn that when they're puppies. You don't pee where you sit. So when we're building a community, you just don't want to do that, because that's not how we operate, and that's not how you want to operate. Because if you're peeing where you're sitting, well, we're just not going to sit there.
I think what's pertinent too is recognizing the difference between constructive and non-constructive feedback. A lot of people online, I find, tend to view the sort of the way they couch their argument as irrelevant. You ever get that? Like they believe that even if they're being aggressive and insulting and derogatory, like you're on the internet, you should expect that and just sort of tune that part of it out and listen to my argument. So then when you sort of react to the fact that they're being so aggressive, they're like, well, you obviously just are shutting me down because you don't like what I have to say and you're not listening. And I think that's fairly common, and I don't think it's very fair.
And it's not true. We're just shutting you down because you're an asshole.
Yeah.
It's the internet. That's the way it is.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there, and I will never have time to listen to all the opinions out there, so I'm probably going to listen to the ones that sound like they want to meet me halfway, that sound like they want to actually have a dialogue and say, I didn't like this, and here's why, and you guys do such a great job, but this was really a failure, as opposed to, I hate you and you guys suck, bio-fail.
Yeah.
I don't think you're actually trying to help with that.
Yeah, the ones that are actually attempting to engage us in a dialogue as opposed to just spouting opinions. And I don't think that necessarily is just among the trolls out there, right? Which we know who they are. I mean, there's people on both sides of the equation, and sometimes they want to just vent, and that's cool. Venting is fine, but if you actually expect us to listen and respond, and sort of treat what you're saying as something we should take into consideration, an actual attempt at communication is actually required.
Yeah, and I think my last point that I want to make is it's just not fair to you guys for us to waste time focusing on those people who are not being constructive, because for every tweet that we're spending on people who are saying, I hate you, we're not tweeting at someone who is trying to engage in a helpful dialogue. And that's just not fair. And I hate it when other people do that, when I see like celebrities or you know, my friends focusing on the just negative, sad people who don't know, whether through ignorance or through having personal problems in their life, that just want to lash out. And they're not tweeting back, or they're not engaging in a forum dialogue with people who are there for the right reasons. And so we just, it's so tempting to feed the trolls, but.
It's hard to resist sometimes. I know I've done it. After the the Dorian reveal a couple of weeks ago, I was getting a barrage of negative tweets. And for a while, I was just like, block. But after a while, I was like, all right, bitches, that's it. I have to respond to a few of these. But after I did it, I don't know that the responding actually made me feel better at the end of the day.
I do want to talk a little bit about our neighbors, though. So our neighbors are our fans, our critics, the media, our neighbors, the people that we have around us. We have a lot of criticism, the healthy criticism, and we do listen to it. And some of them we've written down and we've talked about it. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So one of the points that we hear a lot is, why do we spend so much effort on such a small part of our audience? Wouldn't that effort be better spent on the majority of our players?
I think part of the answering that question is addressing the amount of effort these people seem to think this requires. No, it's fair. I mean, when they say, why do you spend so much effort, there's a bit of observational bias there. Because they hear people talking about it, and if you focus on it, if you're the one who's focusing on that, it's going to seem like that, oh my God, that's all everybody's talking about, why they spend so much time. The amount of time we actually spend, at Bioware at least, talking about how we can not be shitty. It isn't that much. It just requires that at some point in the development process, I mean, hopefully not just one, there are usually several points of checks that something will come up and we stop and say, are we comfortable with what we're saying, what we've done? It's not always going to be fair across the board. Fairness has to weigh against the cost of development and what we can actually spend our time on. But have we done our due diligence is what's important, to stop and do that. And in terms of the actual content, again, I mean, we have a big game. If we're talking, say, for Bioware games about the romance content specifically, we have this entire thing, like the story. The game is, what, 60% combat. So when we're talking about the romances anyway, as a group, that's not the majority of the game by any means.
Gathering elf root and upgrading your armor.
Before you go on to the elf root.
I've got at least 2 hours on character creation alone.
Yeah.
Oh, if I could, well, I think one other factor. I think that question implies something that I think is also true. That as a guy, in my main first Dragon Age Origins playthrough was a female elf mage who romanced Leliana, and my first Dragon Age 2 playthrough was a female hawk who romanced Isabella. And I talked yesterday to a straight woman who was really happy playing a male shepherd romancing Caden in Mass Effect 3. So I think it's false to say that just because someone does not identify as LGBT themselves, that they have no interest in this content, and this content could only possibly be interesting to the gays.
It is a role-playing game.
Yeah, like a lot of times that kind of exploration, or going, wow, I wonder what this would be like. I wonder what it's like to have this kind of relationship as this kind of person. That's a really valuable, interesting thing for everybody.
And we know this is true. I mean, we don't have to rely on anecdotal evidence. Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 both had telemetry collected, and it was opt-out telemetry, which means that you had to specifically go in and say, no, I don't want to provide any data to the telemetry. And it doesn't collect any personal information and stuff. It just collects the data on what choices you're making. And we don't know anything about the player themselves, so we know who made male characters, like the percentage breakdown of male characters and female characters. We don't know if the people who made those characters themselves are male or female. So when it comes to like who chose what romances, we know the percentage of players who partook of optional content, like the gay romances. And when we got our telemetry back from Dragon Age Origins, for instance, the percentage of people who actually used the gay content was a lot higher than sort of the conventionally held figures would account for. So you have to think, okay, either we have a lot more LGBT fans than anybody seems to think are out there, or there's a lot of people who aren't LGBT themselves who want this content. So it applies both ways, and just because we're providing LGBT content, I mean, yes, it's great that we're providing this for the LGBT fans, but we're also providing content that more people than just LGBT fans want.
Yeah, I think that it's a total misnomer to talk about majorities at all. Demographics don't correlate to personal preferences. You could talk to a panel of women or men or people of a certain ethnicity or sexual preference, and they will all give you completely different answers. And that just has to do with gamer styles. And we have surveys and very specialized market research, and we just don't base our game features on demographics and majorities that way.
And that's for more than just romances as well. If you're talking about a game that has choice, there are always going to be choices that the majority of players will pick. Good and evil choices. Everybody says, oh, I love having good and evil choices. From our telemetry, as a for instance, you know that the vast majority of people always choose good choices no matter what. Like, I think it's when we got back, that on average, any good choice, you can get good or evil choice, you can count on about 86% of the players picking the good choice all the time. So if you want to make that argument, you would say, well, only 14% of players are going to choose evil choices, so maybe we shouldn't provide them. This is a game that is predicated on providing choice to the players, and there's a certain amount of inherent value applied to choices when they exist, even if that player is never going to take them. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah. When you encounter those choices, you think, oh, that's cool that that's a choice. I wonder if doing that thing would have an effect. And even if I would have just always picked that one, the fact that I encountered it and it could have changed my game or provided me a different experience is, in itself, valuable.
I mean, I think if you want to, anyone who says, why are you making this for such a small percentage of your audience, I think possibly the best response is, so you're saying we should cut rogues? Because more people play a female hawk a female warden and romance Liliana than picked rogue. I love it.
So I think that brings us to a good point. Another big question we get. Are games really the place to address social inequality? It seems so deliberate and awkward. It feels like you're pandering to gay players for money. Or pandering to the social justice crowd to earn points.
Okay, pandering. I find that there's this thing online, and you will see it in more than just the word pandering, where people like to come up with words that they use where it's clear they don't really know what it means. But what it boils down to is, I don't like that. Mary Sue has become shorthand for, that's a female character that I don't like.
I think that the Garrus romance in Mass Effect 2 was an entirely appropriate and organic evolution of the character, and the Tally romance was fan service.
Fan service. Is it bad for us to provide content that we believe our fans would like? Oh, it's only bad if it's providing content for fans who aren't me. Yeah.
I believe very strongly that we are past the point in saying games are an art form. And just like any form of art, games like novels, like film, like paintings, can explore deep and meaningful themes. And these are themes that can be explored. Not every game needs to explore them, but our games do.
And it's not as if Okay, it's deliberate to talk about. We talk about these issues outside of the game, but when it comes up in the game, it's not necessarily like so some people, they immediately jump to this extreme version. It's like they're going to start the game and the rainbow star is going to flash across the screen and say, wait, just so you know, we have a message.
So people might be concerned that it's shoved down their throat.
We haven't pre-filled out your voter registration for you.
Is this an appropriate place to deal with social inequality? All kinds of entertainment are good places to deal with the idea of social inequality. It has to be considered, and games, by virtue of being games, should not be held to do not get to a free pass. These are questions that come up in television, in movies, and just because we're games, it still needs to be considered. And the act of considering them doesn't need to be something that hits you over the head with it. If it does, that's poor writing. And that ideally, once you play the game, it will be invisible.
And as a consumer, I still walk away making my own decision of how I want to feel, how I want to interpret that theme. Maybe someday there's going to be cliff notes about games. There's already lecturers. Our games are not high school appropriate, but lecturers, college professors who use video games and our games specifically in their courses. So it's there. It's talked about. It's not necessarily, we're not putting it in there to make some kind of political agenda out of it. It's art. It's there in society, and it's there everywhere in film, in movies, in literature.
Well, that's the point of role-playing games, right? Is having a bunch of choices, getting to explore. Sometimes you explore someone who's exactly like you. We were talking about when we were, a big issue we all have is trying to explain to our parents what we do. Until the grandparents who work with computers, we tell our parents they're kind of like choose your own adventure books, only they're really big and complicated. Patrick sat down with my dad, who's Southern Cheyenne, and took him through the character creation in Mass Effect 2, I think. And he made a character who looked exactly like he did, and he was so tickled. And so there's, I thought it was pretty cool. So there's, part of it that you want to be able to make a character like you, that you can identify with, that feels like you. That's why I love, I love my femshep, because she's a badass woman doing her thing, and I like being able to identify that. So there's that side of it. But then there's the exploration side, trying to have an experience that's unlike you and learn from that. And that's, I feel like we owe it to you guys and we owe it to ourselves to provide as much depth and as many choices and as many ways for all of us to collectively experience that as we can. And that's something that's important to us as developers. It's the right thing to do. We feel like it's the right thing to do, and that's it's important to put resources and effort into that.
And I think one other point, when you have a game, obviously, okay, if you're making a game where you're just going around blowing up asteroids or something, then yeah, that doesn't really apply. But when you make a game that has people, that has politics, that has relationships, that has the opportunity to explore these social themes, us refusing to weigh in on that agenda, us refusing to take a stance or allow the opportunities,
or at least consider what it is that it's saying,
is effectively reinforcing the status quo. The decision our saying, oh, we're not going to make a choice, is making a choice. So if we're going to make a choice anyway, we might as well make the right one.
So here's another one. This isn't in game. This is about us outside of the game. That I think ties nicely into that. Why talk about it? Games have done this well and not mentioned that their characters are gay at all. So why do you have to announce it and make a big deal out of it? Why focus on romance? isn't just having good characters and stories more important?
Well, I think a lot of people don't know that there are games like this out there. And if we don't talk about it, there's no way for them to find it. Like I discuss with my friends, and in Edmonton, like Bioware, you talk to a lot of people that live there and you tell them what you do and they have no idea. They've never heard of it before. You start describing the games, they're like, oh, is that like Halo or Call of Duty? And I'm like, no, it's an emotional experience. Important that we discuss it. Like I have a lot of female friends that had never picked up a video game in their life. You know, they see Halo and Call of Duty, or they see Super Mario. You know, that's what we grew up with. Like, you know, we're dealing with young adults now that haven't always had video games. And so it's new to them. And you tell them, like, this is an active movie. You can be in the movie. You can have this experience outside of yourself and try new things in a very, very safe environment. And I think it's really important that we share that because it's moving. It's moving. It creates change for the individual, and I think whenever you create change on the individual level, you're feeding a much larger change. And I think that's very, very important to prioritize.
If I could add to that, I completely agree, and I think that is great that we do bring those things up and raise awareness. But I also think that the question presupposes another incorrect statement or another incorrect idea, which is that we are the ones putting all this focus on it. Dave, in doing the Dorian Q&A, this thing that I thought of myself and Karin totally wasn't going to say until I
totally stole my thing.
Dave, in doing the Dorian Q&A, mentioned Dorian being gay as point, what, 9 of 13? Something like
very last one.
It was the very last question. So Dorian is a complex character, a Tevinter magister who wants to kind of fight against the negative stereotypes of his country and create something brighter. He is confident to the point of arrogant. He is a fascinating character, and him being gay is one part of it. But gay is what the website headline read.
Like if you saw the interview, you could just imagine like a little red dot focusing on that, like. It got picked up by the media, and so there was a lot of focus on that. And then, of course, people, when there's a headline, a lot of people read the headline and sort of treat it as if that's the entire story. So.
And if it's that, and as though that's what we said.
Yeah.
What we said is Dorian is this complex, interesting character, and what a newspaper article said was gay, and then everyone says, Bioware, why are you always focusing on the gay? Well, we're not, but once the fight starts, we have to represent that character fairly and say, well, no, we're not going to shy away from that.
I think what is like pertinent to the question, a lot of people, with relation to Dorian specifically, were like, well, why did you mention it at all? Why not just leave it at, you know, he's from Tevinter and he has these characteristics, he's cocky and stuff like that, and stop there. And I just get to the point where it's like, so what you're saying is the only way to include this content in a way that you would find acceptable is to be completely silent about it. Is that what needs to happen in order for you to feel comfortable? That we can't mention that we have this content and actively invite these players to the table who might not otherwise know that the content is there at all? I mean, are you saying, well, they can play the game and then they'll discover the content? Yeah, but that applies to everything. We announced that we have romances. We want to announce that we allow you to play a female character. We want to announce that you were able to have gay romances if you so choose. You can choose not to, but we're not going to be silent about it just to make somebody feel more comfortable, because there's content for you as well, and if that's not the content that you're looking for, move on.
Yeah, and by talking about it, at least this way, the players can make that choice up front.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Dorian seems really cool. I'm going to be a male inquisitor so that I can romance him. You know, like you can make that choice for your first playthrough, and then you know what? You can go back and do it again.
And to be perfectly honest, it's something that journalists and fans are really excited about, no matter how much anytime we go into like interviews and we're like, all right, let's talk about vast exploration. They're like, yeah, but what about the romances? And we have, you know, like our Cullen thread hit like 1,000 pages, and I'm like, all right, what are we gonna do about like load times on this thread? It's important to our fans. It's important to people who are reading these stories, and we have to recognize that.
Yeah. It's like, if I were to say, hey, you people who want to know more about the romances, interested in romances, you know, hush, hush, you know, the gameplay stuff is way more important. It is important, and we're gonna talk a lot about that. In fact, I think that's the majority of our marketing. If you look at what Bioware actually talks about when we market, the percentage skew is not towards the romances, but there are people who are interested in romances, and that's a totally legitimate thing. If you that's the most important thing in the game to you, cool. So we're going to answer those questions, and we're going to put that out there. When they talk about, but there are games that have gay characters that don't ballyhoo it. Well, those are probably games where you also don't romance those characters, so it's not really relevant except in the context of you experiencing the story, which is what they're going to focus on. This is the kind of game that we make, a game where there are choices that we have lots of different players who believe in things being more important to them. Some people just want to go and kill shit. Some people just want to go and romance everybody and have that nice little combat mini game that happens occasionally. And that is perfectly fine, because God forbid on the internet that there's somebody who enjoys something you like in a way that you don't enjoy. Right?
I'm going to be honest.
Ideally, we're providing a bunch of stuff, and you can pick the things you like to do, and maybe you can try something new, and maybe you try something new and you hate it. You don't have to do it again. But you know, it's our job to provide as long a buffet as we can of choices and things for you to do. And so, yeah, people are going to talk about. I went to asparagus. That's a really lame thing to have in a buffet, but fruit, yes.
I'm going to be honest. As a fan, I also want my expectations set, because I was pretty upset when you told me I couldn't romance Dorian as a lady. So I was like, well, I guess my first playthrough is going to be as Dude Inquisitor, so that's fine. But I wanted my expectations set so that he wasn't like, there, Poppet. It's fine. Now my expectations are set, but it's fine. I want to move on.
You know that he does that, right?
You're really, that's very well he does. We got excited. Now I'm upset. Now I'm definitely going to do that when I'm romancing Iron Bull. Hey, Dorian.
Little condition on if origin account equals Jessica Merizan.
Riff hard. Okay, so this one, now that we've laughed, last question. Your game feels like it's being made for minorities. Tip tip.
Oh, no.
And straight white people are the afterthought. I'm putting my finger on.
Is that the text? Okay.
You're not reading that at all in a loaded manner.
I'm sorry. Like,
No, it's hilarious.
I just find it fascinating that we make a game where we specifically paid attention, and Dave, to kind of a crazy German degree, like we'll balance the scales so that things are, okay, we've got this, and okay, we have an equal number of boxes, and
It doesn't end up being entirely equal, but I mean,
well, no, I
It's not
a
enough to
different
do. We
way to
have huge charts of characters,
Yeah.
who does what, and it's not just romances, it's who's a rogue, like, you know.
but I
We don't want
believe
an entirely rogue party, but you know, so we want to balance a whole bunch of stuff across the board, and we're very conscious of that. We put ridiculous amounts of time into planning that.
and that said, I think we can say that Strady is probably okay. I think Strady's going to make it through this one.
Biggest battle moment?
Okay, the thing, I guess the nature of that question, the nature of the question relates to privilege. And it's a word that I'm always reluctant to invoke because it's been used so often, or at least it's viewed as kind of an attack word, right?
yeah, it's become a bad word.
It's become a bad word, but it's not really. Privilege just means that there are experiences that you do not have the perspective to recognize. I have privilege. I can be gay, still a guy, still white. And that's something that if you just recognize that I'm not going to know, I may have empathy, say, for women. Absolutely, I have lots of empathy for women, but I'm not going to know what it's like to be a woman. If a woman says to me that something is important to her, I'm not going to say, well, no, I don't understand why that should be important to you. Why would I?
Yeah.
And if I can recognize that there's a reason why I don't understand why it's important, that's just recognizing that you have privilege. That's all it is. So when someone says like, what was the question again?
About how we make games for minorities.
Right. So part of that is that there's this view that, okay, so there's so many games that just have content for straight white guys. Absolutely, without question. And the idea that from their perspective, that suddenly there is actual equality, actually from their perspective means they're getting less. So they feel like, oh, why am I getting less? Which means less than all of it.
Yeah, I mean, you compare it to, compare it to KOTOR. Well, okay, straighty, you've got...
Stop using
that. I have S-word privileges. A straight male player in KOTOR playing a male character in KOTOR has one option, Bastila. And in Dragon Age Origins, that straight player had two options. They're still getting more. The fact that gay and bisexual content was added didn't give them less. They're still getting more. And a straight player, in DAI, like Cassandra, is, as someone who likes ladies, Cassandra is not hard on the eyes. And she is strong, and she is badass, and she is really, really attractive.
She goes for miles.
And if she is not your type, Josephine is adorable and also gorgeous, and I think you're going to be okay.
And actually, if you look between, say between DA2 and DAI, or between DAO and DAI, you actually still have the same number of options.
Can I say what I said last year at our panel?
You could.
You get a romance. You get
But if you're going to look at the total number of romances, like, hey, so I had 2 options in DAO, and I had 2 options in DA2, and I still have 2 options in DAI, but there's other people getting options, and you're going to say, well, wait, why aren't I getting all the options? Well, that's too fucking bad.
We'll have to start another playthrough.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, so I guess it also relates to privilege. Is if that really bothers you, well, thank God you have so many other choices. Because that's the entire rest of the industry. And if you're going to turn around and say, well,
the entire rest of the industry.
These gay game players, they've been playing the games. They obviously do, so I don't see why they should be catered to when they already have the same games available to them that I do. That is privilege, because it's not the same. Because if they have an option, and say it's not right for them, it's not like you can turn and say, well, I can get these options everywhere else as well, so I got my pick of all the games to choose from. You don't. You don't. And that's really the inherent problem, right, in the industry, is that if there was some breadth across the industry, if it was something that many games actually did, then it wouldn't be a focus of the media or fandom. People could have their choice among the buffet of games, which is what your average straight white player has had their entire gaming existence. So why would they even think about that at all? But they just need to stop and recognize for just a small moment that that's not the experience of every player out there. And a lot of people are playing games because they love games. They just would like the games to be a little bit better.
Yeah. Pierre Bourdieu has a term that he uses that I prefer to privilege because, like David says, it's become this attack word, and it's called doxa. And it's this idea that you can't imagine any experience other than the one that you experience. It's like you can't imagine the sky any other color than blue. You can't imagine time other than linear, which not all cultures experience time as linear. But you can't wrap your mind around anything other than, you know, you can't imagine not sitting on a toilet. Obviously, not everyone sits on a toilet. Some people squat on the toilet. I have a funny story about that. No, seriously. You look under the stall to be like, oh, no one's under here.
Let's not go down that road.
No, it's but the thing is,
true.
that's privilege. You can't imagine an experience other than the one that is in your world. And I think that we have to be cognizant as developers that we're coming in and, you know, David has his experience, Patrick has his experience, Karin, Robyn. I have my experience, and we can't just place that in the game. Obviously, we bring our experiences, and as developers, we all come together and we bring that to the table. And it's diverse and it's true, and we want that, and that's why choice matters so much.
Well, and that goes into our games too. Like often around the office when we're touching on more, you know, complex subjects, we do a poll. We talk to everybody. We take everybody's different values into consideration because we have what 300 plus people working on Dragon Age right now. That's a good sample size, you know, of different opinions and different backgrounds, and it definitely, you know, like that's why we build this choice in, because we have a good pool of people saying this is what I want.
Do you have any closing thoughts? Because now we're over time. I feel really bad. Is there any way we can have like a few minutes for questions? We can? Awesome. Oh my God, you guys are awesome. Yeah, everyone give them a round of applause. All right, we're going to take these questions. I'm going to run around. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Oh my God, I'm running. Okay, I saw your hand first. Then you.
Awesome, thank you. My question relates to the process that goes into creating new IP or designing a new world setting. When you're trying to figure out what the societal attitudes or the views of the average Joe in the world that you're designing are on LGBT issues, do you start from kind of like a baseline assumption that our world is going to have the same societal biases and prejudices as the real world, as our society that we live in? Or do you kind of say, well, you know, this is our fictional world that we're creating, the real world rules don't apply? And specifically, in particular, I don't know if any of you can speak on development of Jade Empire, but that was a game that specifically was modeled after real world culture. So, yeah.
I don't know that it was specific. It was, I would say, inspired by ancient China, but it definitely wasn't modeled after it specifically. It was, you know, to the same extent that Dragon Age was modeled after Europe.
Yeah,
I think
it is a Eurocentric fantasy world, but I mean, so you start with that as a baseline, sure, absolutely, without question. I think everybody would, but then you're looking at, well, it's a weird argument that happens sometimes. People will say, well, it should be more like this because it's modeled after medieval Europe, so everything should be like medieval Europe. And then they will, on other points, will say, but it's a fantasy world, so it doesn't have to be realistic. What it needs is to be plausible, and it needs to have internal consistency. Anything beyond that, we can decide what we want to keep and what we want to throw away. We don't have to adhere to real-world medieval history, and if we would, well, we wouldn't have female players at all, because they would all be kept in a tower in their nice little hoop skirt and married off at the age of 14.
Okay, but to be fair, a lot of the assumptions in that, people who actually study medieval history more deeply know that a lot of the things people assume, well, there were no people of color in medieval history. Well, okay, no, that's actually entirely false, and anyone who studied medieval history knows it's a bunch of garbage. But because everyone's understanding of medieval history
Is a Ren fair, and that's where it stops.
Yeah.
But and it depends on the MVP, because like when we were working on Mass Effect and Mass Effect 3, talking about, you know, the implications of same-sex romances there, that's a more real world. I mean, it's supposed to have evolved from Earth, how it is right now as we know it. And so when we were thinking about that, it was like, well, by that point, the way society is moving now, it'll be a non-issue. So we're just going to assume no big deal. We're not even going to mention it because that's how it's going to be. In the same way, we're assuming that technology has allowed a lot of diseases to be cured, and, you know, sort of trying to envision the progress that has been made starting from a relatively real world place. So it's depending on the world, and I need to shut up.
I think I'll just, sorry to interrupt, but I think I'll just close with just there are two additional considerations that go into that. One is that the being realistic is not necessarily the goal as much as the player experience. But we also don't necessarily need the world to be utopian, because we still want conflict. And so that's what we have to balance. We don't need to be realistic if that's going to mean a shitty experience for the player. Then we can point our finger and say, well, it's realistic to have homophobia, so if you chose to play a gay character, well, welcome to a shitty experience. But we don't need to have everybody treated as if you know, it wasn't a thing at all, because that's not necessarily true to the gay experience either.
Hi, you guys mentioned that, you know, the media is kind of part of this umbrella of neighbors who are always being freaked out. And I feel like they really unfairly judged your games based on the romance. You know, Mass Effect 1 was kind of labeled a sex game by Fox News. I feel like almost you guys are taking that criticism a bit too harshly, because the scenes in your games have really become like more censored as they, you know, 1, 2, 3, like Samantha Trainor's having a shower in her lingerie. What's up with that? Dragons 2 is like they get in bed, it's cut to black, before they even take anything
Well,
off.
actually, that sex scene that Fox was going on about, there was a little blue side boob. That was
Side boob? You can get that on afternoon TV.
yeah. Right. But that's the thing. I mean, it was if that's why you bought the game, you're going to be really disappointed with that's all you get, right? So, but it's a lot of perception, right? We haven't really changed the way that we've done the game, and some of it's technical, and
some of it, I mean, for example, the trainer taking the shower in her lingerie was quite simply we couldn't get a nude model.
okay.
And then we were supposed to get Steam to cover the fact that she wasn't nude. We were going to imply that she was nude, but we used Steam to cover it. And then the Steam effect turned out it broke on so many levels. And we're like, okay, she's in lingerie, and we're not fading to black, and people who want the lesbian romance actually get to see something.
I will say though that we have discussed that as a group,
Yeah.
and it's hard because we're Canadian. It's like we have this conversation. Is this okay? Is this rude?
We have the conversation of avoiding eye contact.
Yes.
It's like
we have this conversation. We're an 18+ game. I think we can have nipples.
Don't get me started on boob physics.
So you guys mentioned addressing critics, addressing the media, and addressing fans already, but I have a question regarding other developers. So there are other developers who are getting flack for not giving people enough choices in character development. I'm not going to name any names, but ironically we're all staring at the big logo. What kind of advice do you have for them and how they react, or how they even explain themselves, or how they go through the development
Well, I
process?
think it's really difficult because you don't want to sling shit at another developer. You never want to. That never ends well.
Until we understand, I mean, you know, there are technical limitations. We probably have a pretty good idea of what,
there are heartbreaking
how
things.
decisions were made. We've had to cut stuff that
Like,
is
oh
painful.
God, really, we gotta cut that? Come on.
So there's always more to a story, you know, the same way the media kind of treats everyone the same way. So there's empathy and understanding, I think.
That said,
That's
sometimes the way that is communicated could be better. But I mean, then again, we've all been there and stuck our foot so far down our mouths that, you know, it's coming out of our ass. So it's like, you know, okay, they really stepped in it, you know. So
but I mean, on a professional level, we, you know, see each other at conventions, and occasionally when we come out of our developmental holes and go talk to each other, you know, we talk about it. What did you do? How did you deal with this? So I think there is a level of, you know, inspiration and homage, and, you know, oh, that was cool. How did you guys do that? So, you know, we do talk about it.
You can
encourage creativity in various ways.
Yeah, you can do positive comparisons. I just think no developer ever gets any mileage out of comparing themselves in a negative way to another.
Yeah. You don't want to go. You don't want to go to somebody and say, "See, you should have done it like us." Well, too bad for you. That's you don't want to do that. And
there's any number of things we haven't done.
Yeah,
right?
there are things we can look at.
On. So yeah, it's better to keep it positive, but we do try. Okay, shut up.
No, I was just saying. So I think this. No, you're fine. I was just saying. So I think this is our last question.
Okay.
Hi. I have two really quick questions. The first one is, I know addressing the first topic we talked about not feeding the trolls. I'm not defending them or anything, but I think a good majority of those people approach it in that light because they think that will get them a response. So I guess what's your suggestions, if you have any, for giving constructive feedback without blending into all the other voices and not being pushy and annoying and saying the same thing a million times?
Well, you may have to say the same thing a million times. I think the thing is just to, if the person seems like somebody you could communicate with, then do. At the very least, it's like I think I mentioned my response to Pastel a number of years back. The straight white guy. He approached the topic, and I thought he was misguided, but he was reasonable. And when I may not have reached him, but I reached a lot of other people. And I think that at the end of the day, if you can approach somebody in a reasonable manner and be the bigger person, everybody else at least is going to recognize that.
And if you're the 1,000,001st person who has said something to us, that's something we damn well better be listening to. So, you know, your message is as valuable as everyone else who is saying that, and it's adding weight to something that we should be looking at and moving towards. So just saying it, and
I would also be.
They're married.
If I can add,
please go ahead.
I will stand by saying that we always listen. And if the fact that we always listen does not mean that we do not always do what people are saying we should do, there are things happening behind the scenes that we can't control. There are things happening that, you know, in order to make a game, there are decisions that have to be made.
Listening is not obeying. Listening is hearing and taking into account what someone's saying, because no matter what the opinion is, there's going to be other opinions across the board, right? So we cannot listen just to the people on our forums or on Tumblr. There are a lot of opinions to take into account, and we do sit down and discuss them, and eventually are going to have to make a decision there.
And I'm getting, I don't know, Dave gets tweeted a lot, I get tweeted a lot. The only questions I really won't answer are the ones where either I have no idea what the answer is, or I can't answer because that's not part of the information reveal that it's not something we're prepared to talk about in Dragon Age Inquisition yet. Or they're abusive and I just block them.
Works about combat and I have no idea. Ask Robyn.
I feel so warm and fuzzy with all of you guys here. Unfortunately, that's the end of our time here today for our panel. But if you didn't get to ask your question, or you were too shy, or you just want to say hello, we do have a signing at 1 p.m. Is it here?
I think it's here.
It's maybe here.
Union Square, Panorama 3, across the hallway.
Look at you guys.
Thank you so much.
You guys are awesome. Because we went so over time, we do need to skedaddle, but we'll be there at 1 p.m. Thank you guys so much, GaymerX2.